Good afternoon. It's good to be back in Guernsey. It's the fourth time I've been here in 18 months, and it always feels like coming home here, actually. So I think you guys are doing something that's pretty right already. But mind you, I didn't come here before the Dandelion project, so maybe it was different before then. Now, David Hemery, the former Olympic gold medalist in the 400-metre hurdles and the creator of the Be the Best You Can Be programme for schools, has a saying that there's a spark of greatness in everyone. And I believe that absolutely to be true. And the problem is that most people I come across in the world don't believe that. And the tragic consequence is many people live their entire lives without discovering what their spark is. Now, I consider quite a slow learner, and my resilience hasn't always been that good. I get knocked down and I don't pick myself back up that quickly. But throughout that, I've always believed there was a spark in me. I've never quite known what it was, but I believed there was something there for most of my life. But now I think I've discovered it. And I just want to talk about my personal experiences, and starting off with the first time I discovered something in me that I didn't realise was there. It was completely hidden. It goes back to when I was 10 years old. Now, when I was 10 years old, I was very bad at maths. And the reason I knew I was very bad at maths is because my maths teacher made it painfully obvious to me. And when I say painfully, I do mean that literally. In my day at school, it wasn't unknown for a student to be summoned to the front of the room to have their knuckles rapped with the sharp side of the ruler. And that wasn't unknown to me, nor was having my ear twisted till it hurt. So I was very clear that there were some people who were good at maths, and that I definitely wasn't one of them. But something quite surprising happened to me also when I was 10, because my maths teacher left and I got a new maths teacher. Now, Mr. Schwartz, my new maths teacher, was very different to my previous maths teacher. He seemed to see something in me that I wasn't aware of. He listened to me, he encouraged me, and when I failed at anything, he didn't berate me, he didn't punish me, and he didn't humiliate me in front of the class. And he just encouraged me some more, and he seemed to believe in me. And what was extraordinary is that within that year, maths went from being my worst subject to being my best subject, and remained that way right the way through my schooling. Now, I'm not pretending that I'm any great mathematician. I didn't follow it as a career or use it that much in my career at all. But the key part here is I'd actually recognised that there was something there that I had no awareness of. My maths ability, I'd given up on it, that I now knew about. So I thought, if that's true in me, then surely it must be true in others as well. As I said, I was a very slow learner, and it took me many years to learn my next lesson, really. And I remember when it was just over 16 years ago, and I was sitting in a room with about 200 people, quite similar to this in a way, and the person at the front said something that caught my attention. He said, some of you who are sitting there think you're good listeners. I thought, yeah, I'm a good listener. At that time, I was an account manager for a software development company. And my job was managing a lot of the large national accounts, growing the business, growing the relationship, selling them more services. And I'd heard in those days that thing that Mark said, we've got two ears and one mouth and you should use them in that proportion. And I thought I did that, so yeah, I was a good listener. Then he carried on, he said, a lot of you sitting there thinking you're good listeners aren't actually good listeners, because you're too busy listening to the voice inside your head. And for those of you now going, what voice inside my head? I don't have a voice inside my head. That's the one I'm talking about. That kind of hit me like a thunderbolt, because he'd almost lifted the words from inside my head, and I suddenly realised I did have a voice inside my head. And in that moment, I realised I'd pretty much never listened to anyone for my entire life, except through my internal voice, which was an expert at bringing in my opinions, my judgments, my self-interest, and my agenda to everything I heard. And I remember the day after that conference, going for a walk in the park with my dog. I remember it very clearly going, why wasn't I taught this at school? Instead of all the other stuff that I crammed into my brain, regurgitated at exam time, and promptly forgot it. This could be valuable to me every day of my life, and it has been actually. It's transformed my relationship with my partner, my ex-wife, my children, and pretty much all of my friends. Now, when I talk about real listening, what do I mean by real listening? I probably best demonstrate it by giving you a couple of examples of what I think aren't real listening. So here's one of them. So Tony, how's that talk going along you're preparing? Yeah, go on, I'm listening. Yeah, no, carry on, I am listening. Has anyone here experienced that type of listening? Yeah. It's not that great, is it, to be on the receiving end of it? When you think about it, when I'm communicating here now, I'm using words, I'm using my tone of voice, which is hopefully not monotonous, and I'm using my body language, my facial expressions, and I know I use my hands a lot. So, he's missing most of my communications anyway. Here's a different version of not good listening. So, Tony, how's that talk coming along that you're preparing? Actually, it's not going that well. I mean, I've got loads of ideas going around in my head, but I can't actually get any sort of semblance around, any structure. I know exactly how you feel. Remember that talk I did 4 months ago? I was determined to finish it and prepare it early, but I ended up doing it 2 nights before the actual talk. Actually, talking about it now, I can feel the stress levels rising. So what happened there, I don't know if you noticed, but his inner voice caught onto what I was talking about and told him, you can interrupt that because that's something to do with you. And he did. He totally hijacked the conversation and took it over from me. If you'd met me 17 years ago, that's probably how I would have listened to you, because my realization was that I spent 90% of my listening in that area. So what is real listening? Real listening is actually, that inner voice doesn't go away. I still have it, but it's about taking it, not as Mark said, taking the cotton wool out of your ears and putting them in your mouth, taking them out of wherever they are and putting them in the inner voice's mouth. So it's there, but actually not paying attention, but being really curious about what it's like in that other person's shoes. Helping them understand themselves better. That's what real listening is. And so, that learning, it also changed my career. So I trained to be a coach. And I learnt about how to listen properly. And now I make a living at listening to people and training other people to listen. I've been working recently, as well as with the Mo Foundation, I'll come back to Mo in a minute, but I've been working with young offenders in prison. Now, they're an interesting group of people, because all the ones I've met, I don't think they've ever been listened to in their life. They're told what to do, what not to do, when to do it, when not to do it, where, and so on and so on. And I think most of them in their entire lives have been told what they're doing is wrong and what they're thinking is wrong. So it's quite foreign for them to have someone come in and ask them what they're thinking and actually listen to the responses and be interested and curious about it. One of the main things I remember learning in my coach training was one of my supervisors said to me, Tony, don't just listen to the person you see in front of them, listen for their most magnificent self. Look for their spark of greatness, what's behind what you're seeing. And I hope I do that. One prisoner I worked with, one young man, when I met him, he was very angry. He kept getting into trouble with other inmates and with the staff. And over a period of 8 weeks, he changed. He became calmer. He became more at peace with himself. He told me near the end that he actually now saw prison as his university. And it got to the point where other inmates were coming and seeing him and asking for advice about problems they were having in their relationships with some of their fellow inmates. So I know that real listening, particularly listening for somebody's most magnificent self, can make magic happen. It really can. So now, as well as doing that, I work with teachers. I train teachers the power of questioning and listening and how to do it effectively to help children be the best they can be. And as Mark said, I work with the Mo Foundation, training new coaches. Now, as Mark already said, Darren Robson, who's a very good friend of mine, founded Mo. And Mo is a self-funding charity that has a gifting contribution model. And to date, it's gifted over £800,000 worth of development support to people going on the courses. And thanks to Mark and the Dandelion project, and also Dave and the Youth Commission and Chris Blinn, we've now established a Mo hub in Guernsey. And to date, we've trained and qualified 20 coaches to date, and 17 are partway through their training and will be qualified at the end of the month. Some of those are here as well, I'm pleased to see. And the next Guernsey course, if anyone's interested, starts on the 16th of March. Where I think the Mo course is really in line with everything the Dandelion project's doing is because not only are we training coaches to be coaches, we're also training them to actually look and start finding their own magnificent self, but also helping others to do that too, which I think fits in very nicely with the Dandelion project's goals. Just want to change the topic. I said earlier that I wasn't very good at resilience. Almost 6 years ago, in response to somebody asking me what my New Year's resolution was, I decided to see if I could run at least a mile a day for a month, for the month of January. And I actually found that not too difficult. So I decided to continue the experiment and see how long I could keep it going for. Now, after 5 years of running at least a mile every day, I don't think it's a coincidence. During that time, I've started working with young offenders. I've started training teachers with the Be the Best You Can Be program, and also training Mo coaches. I also started blogging about my mile a day, and I now have a monthly column in a running magazine about what I learn about life, both from running and from the power of small daily positive habits. And what I've also found is actually that's improved my resilience. And I've also found my purpose, and I think, you know, which is my spark. It's only a spark still, but I'm fanning it and putting fuel on it. And my purpose is to help others connect. I mean, it's a very common theme that we've been hearing today. To connect, communicate, discover, and live from their most magnificent self. So when I talk about connecting, I'm talking about listening. Quieting that inner voice, but listening to people. Communicating, asking them questions, using questions that help them find their own solutions. That self-directed learning we've been hearing about earlier today. Discovering their most magnificent self is quite simple. You listen to them looking for their most magnificent self, not just the person with the problems and issues in front of you. And I think what's important about the resilience bit and living from it, I've learned so much about positive small daily habits. And I started off choosing running because I thought it would help my physical health and fitness, but it's probably helped me more with my mental fitness and health than I ever expected. I'd just like to leave you now with a quote from Frederick Laloux, who's written a book called Reinventing Organisations, where he talks about circular organisations rather than pyramids, as Michael was just talking about. Frederick says, "We are not problems waiting to be solved, but potential waiting to unfold." So my challenge to you is, what will you do to uncover or unfold your magnificent self and your spark? What will you do to help someone else find theirs? Thank you very much.